give you everything that I told you. So, but I have to laugh. Over at Covenant Health Systems, they have the pictures of the presidents of the board. And one day I was over there, and one of the people at the meeting said, "Hey, Sister June, look at that picture of you. You have the same suit on." It was 10 years later, and I still have. So the moral of the story is, do a good job, work hard, and buy clothes that last forever. So, well, I think today we're supposed to talk about covenant. Is that right? I don't want to repeat anything that's in there, because that gave you the beginning of covenant. But I do want to say that I look at covenant now, and we're at another transition period. Part of it is because after covenant began, and I'll tell you the struggles of covenant in the beginning. We had independent institutions. They were all doing very well. And you know, to have some woman come and say, you know, we're thinking about having a system. Well, if you remember back all those years, institutions were very independent. And we had different institutions. 2 of the boards said they were going to quit. They were going to resign en masse if we started a system. So I said, well, think about it, and tomorrow just hand in your letters and I'll accept them. And I was so nervous because I said, what do I do if these boards quit? You know, you have to find new people, and nobody quit. After I said, think about it, because we're going to form the system, and I want you to be part of that system. So it was an exciting time when you have transitions taking place, and not everybody's for the transitions. Our sisters had a hard time because they mostly worked in all of these institutions, and they really had a hard time thinking we're going to have a system. Of course, when they saw David, the little kid, they thought, oh, I must be mental to hire somebody so young. But you know what? All of us gray nuns were young at one time. And we did a lot of things that people thought were crazy. And I think we have to look at how we transition. And I was talking to David this morning. My feeling is we're in another transition because healthcare has changed so radically that now we need people who are trained. You know, sometimes people laugh at me because I say that God creates the brains we need for transitions. And I think I'm not technologically developed yet. I'm just in the process. I have an old type phone, and one of my nephews came and the phone rang in my apartment. He says to me, "Where's your phone?" And I said, "Oh, it's over here. I keep it on this little table." And I pick it up, and he said, "I've never seen a phone like that." It's a landline phone. "I've never seen a phone like that." And I said, "Well, it's new. They're just coming out." He said, Dad, look, Aunt June has a phone that's new." You never know. Don't lie to your kids, though. It's not a good thing. But anyway, now how did I get onto that? Transition, that's right. And I think God creates the brains that we need for transitions. And I look at young people here, technologically savvy. You know the future, you know what we have to do to create a good mission future for healthcare. And it's not easy. And so I look at Covenant Health, and almost everybody that was there in the beginning now is retiring, except you, David. Stay on.
Because I was 12 when I was indentured servitude.
You know, you look at all the people retiring, and I look at the new people coming in, and I always use the phrase, you have to seize the moment to live the mission. Because the opportunities come, and we have to really use those opportunities and not just wait. We need to know when opportunities come and seize the opportunities and create what's needed for the future. And I think healthcare, Catholic healthcare, has a good future. I look at the discussions you had today about compassion. You know, if we need anything in today's world, we need compassion for one another, for our co-workers, and and for ourselves and for all the people with whom we work. So that's my prayer for all of you, and I want to have a special thank you for all that you do, to live the mission now and to live it into the future and pass it on. You got to pass it on. I won't be around for the next 30 years. Well, maybe 28. I'm not sure. But anyway, you know, the next video is going to be all lay people. So we have to count on your gift of self to really lead Covenant into the future. And then David, you were going to say a word or two.
It's been like this my entire working life. You know, one of the things that we've done as part of this sixth cohort is to try to put a couple of faces to the story. And so part of the advantage that we have is we've both been here since the beginning. June clearly since the beginning in '83 when she had she and the council had the idea to set up the system, and I came the next year. And you know, I think there's a privilege in being together this long and being able to talk about that history. But it's not about us. I mean, I think the part that is very interesting to me is the example that June and the Grey Nuns have set for all of us, which is letting go, and letting go in a way that has style. There's just no other way to talk about it. Hard, but with grace and style. And every bit of those images that you saw up there were transitions for lots of groups of people letting go. Every conversation that led to one of the transfers of sponsorship was a congregation letting go, saying goodbye, having to adjust to a different reality for their own members, and hoping that that they had entrusted their organizations to worthy people, you know. And part of the thing that really, I think, from the beginning, when you came up with the new name in '86, and some of you have probably heard this story, but we were talking about changing the name from Grey Nuns Health Systems. That wasn't really selling very well out there, you know, because everybody thought we were trying to turn everybody into a Grey Nun, which was not true. And so June comes back into the office and from Mass and says, "I got the new name." We did not spend $10 million to come up with a new name and a brand and identity. We just relied on June. And she came out of Mass and said, "Covenant, that's got to be the new name." So we started talking about why. And you know, I think at that point was when we really started first putting down in paper an understanding of the mutuality of expectation piece. So every time we talked to one of the congregations, it really was about trust, and it really was about having a mutual understanding of what it is that we were promising to do as we went forward. And some of you were in parts of those transitions, not always pretty. Some of you were in parts of those transitions, and so you saw the promise, and hopefully what you see now is the delivery. That's the most critical part. And I think for me, the cool thing is you're part of that delivery. It's the promise that you all took on to do that. And some of us had a chance to really think about it. For many of you, it was just suck it up and do it. But for some of us, we really had a chance to think that through. So it's the trust in the transition, and the understanding that the Grey Nuns really set up an example that to me is still pretty amazing of being able to let go. And you know, I've had the chance to be with with the sisters when they haven't been so happy about some of the changes, and to talk those through. And at every one of them, there's high emotion, but there's also a real understanding of the need for transitions. One of the things, June, you may not know, and some of you weren't part of the senior leadership may not be aware, but our last meeting a few weeks ago was on resilience. It really was, with all the changes that were taking place right now. It's all about how do you think about resiliency? What is resiliency? How do you own it? How do you communicate it? How do you make it part of who you are? I'll just say one last quick thing on that. I think for the Grey Nuns, resilience came out of a belief in divine providence. You know, it's like that, there's just an inherent trust. It will work out. And I never really thought I was gonna get sucked into that. But, you know, over the years, I really have gotten sucked into that in terms of really believing that. You know, you can talk about it, but it's when you really believe it and let it go that it really is powerful. So for me, everything happens for a reason. There's a reason we're all here today. There's a reason these things happen. The people that we work with and those that we serve benefit from that. I think the other part of us being here is to tell you some stories that you might not hear otherwise, because stories are really powerful, and hearing them is a way of just you knowing they're there. So she talks about what the sisters said about me. So let me tell you what I talked to my wife about as we were looking at this transition. Well, we were in South Bend, and I was working for a not-Catholic hospital, competing very actively with a Catholic hospital, and was teaching at Notre Dame, and most of my students were nuns, oddly enough. And so I really, having gone to Catholic schools my whole life, I figured that was payback time, so it was gonna happen. And I enjoyed that part of that. And we wanted to move east. My mother-in-law was on the board of a hospital that had a relationship with a search firm, and I met with them. And after about a 3-hour meeting, the consultant said, "Listen, I got this group of nuns who are talking about setting the system, and would you talk to them?" So I think I was 29. I said, "Sure, why not?" And so I got a packet of information with the picture of June Ketterer on it. She looked really wicked stunned. I mean, really wicked stunned. And so I said to Susan, "Oh my God, you know, I mean, gotta go A, to a convent for an interview. B, I'm gonna be meeting with her." And I walked in, and the story is just so simple. I walked in, and you know how sometimes chemistry just works, right? So chemistry worked, and it was cool, because I had no clue I would be working for a group of nuns, ever. Just wasn't in my thinking. But when June and I started talking about what she wanted to do and how, and the Grey Nuns themselves, I got fascinated by the story of Marguerite Duville, and like many founders and foundresses, you know, the original entrepreneurs, and just a really practical approach to it. So I fell in love with June pretty fast. I told Susan, she was okay with it. She's a nun, it's all right. But that really that's the truth. It was a flyer. It was a total flyer in terms of what we were trying to accomplish. But just a great group of people. And yeah, I'll stop there. That's the other side of that story.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to that. You know, when we were transferring our institutions, we had set up a committee, because we didn't know what we were going to do with these institutions. because we didn't have sisters who wanted to be administrators. Our sisters, our new sisters coming in, wanted to work directly with the poor, not in institutions. So we really had to face that issue because, you know, in today's world, you don't tell your sisters what to do, you make suggestions. In the old days, you used to just tell them, but now you make suggestions. And if the suggestions don't work, or they really have a different vision of what they want their life to be, well, you have to let it go. So we decided that we needed to set up a committee. And we looked at the institutions and we said we had 12 options. I mean, talk about creativity, we looked at everything. But we had from selling everything to just selling part of the community or keeping everything as it is. So it went from as is to selling everything. And those were two options we didn't want to take. So I said, you know, we've got to keep our sisters informed. I don't want them to hear in the Globe, the Boston Globe, that we're selling off properties and stuff. So we set up this committee that was going to be communications. Those of you who work in groups, you know how important communication is. So everything was communication. We had a newsletter that went out to all the sisters. We had meetings. I went to every house, every community to talk about this transition. I went to all of the institutions and met with the boards and the management. We had loads and loads of meetings. But I have to tell you something funny. We had a big hospital in Ohio, St. Vincent's Hospital, and where we were transitioning from Covenant to the Mercy system. It was our only hospital in the Midwest, and so we decided that we would give it up and transfer it to the Mercy system. So I broke my back trying to communicate with everybody about everything. And the day before the transition, one of our sisters says, yeah, but St. Vincent's is still going to be part of Covenant, isn't it? And I said, no, we're going to let it go now. It's going to become part of the Mercy system, and we're going to let it go. She said, well, you should keep us informed. You don't tell us anything. And all of a sudden, we're getting rid of our best hospital. And of course, everybody else understood. But I never forgot that. You can really try to communicate to your very best, but there's somebody that doesn't get it. And you just have to allow that experience. So I'm sitting here today saying each one of you, get it. Okay.
Now you know where I get it from. You thought it was me, so.
To get it, and that was Eileen, remember?
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God, that was so funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think life calls us to our time. This is our time, your time. Calls us to our time, calls us to our ministry. And our ministry, if we're happy in our ministry, we have the patience to work through it and to allow it to happen in detail. And I think it calls us, our ministry always calls us to that respect for each other. That total respect so that everybody knows what everybody's trying to do. I never forget when I worked at St. Joseph's in Nashua. Peter Davis was the CEO, and it was budget time. Do any of you get ulcers when budget time comes? Well, anyway, he set up this new system where every department head, we would all meet together. And we would talk about our budget, what we needed, and we would talk about the general budget, and we didn't have enough money for everything, but we listened to each other on what each department needed and whether they could get it or not. So it was a great experience, but I'll tell you, your heart burned because you wanted something and no, this year you can't get it because this department needs something else. I used to laugh at the x-ray. Anybody here an x-ray technician? Okay then, don't pass this around. But I used to laugh at the x-ray techs. They always need a new machine. You know, millions of dollars for a new machine. So this first year, the x-ray department came and they needed this new machine, which was going to be a couple of $1 million. And then you had the pharmacy that just wanted a new pill and a new experience. You had all this weight going around. And I must tell you, the poor x-ray department had to wait another year because their millions of dollars, they had a good system, they had everything they needed, but they wanted the new thing. And so sometimes we have to wait for the new. We have to make best use of the old and wait for the new. but never give up hope. You go back the next year, the next budget system, and you learn a lot from every department head, and at the same time, you understand why the give and take happens in budgets. So I always pray at budget time. I live at Uville Place, assisted living for the elderly. I never thought I'd be old enough to be there, but that's the way it is. And actually, it's budget time. So you hear the staff talk about.
It is across the system.
Huh?
It is across the system.
That's
Everybody
right.
here is going, I could be doing some budget work right now.
Yeah, it's budget for everybody. And so you hear the nurses' aides say, it's budget time here, you know, and we need more nurses' aides. And then you hear the dietary department say, it's budget time, and they're gonna be cutting back. Now, they get all this out of their head. And it's budget time, and we need some new dietary staff. And we need this and we need that. And I said, you know, don't worry now, because if you talk to your staff leader about all these needs, they'll take it to the budget, and you might get something, and you might not. It's not the end of the world. The other day, you were talking about, what was it now? Something about patience. The discussion was about patience and how we can wait. We have to wait out the experience. And sometimes things take care of themselves. And I said, boy, we're at that point again. I see a lot of the staff, and that's what I mean, it's like a second refounding, because we have the staff at Covenant now. The original staff are retiring, right? And so the new staff have to seize the spirit of Margaret Duville. And a lot of our new staff never heard of Margaret Duville. So now it's time for all new people to really say, I work for Covenant, and there's a spirit at Covenant that I need to seize and capture, so that I remain faithful to the healthcare ministry. I do my very best job, and I teach are you all in management? Is this group all in management? Yeah,
Yes,
okay. So then you work with other people that you need to pass on that spirit. So it's a challenge, but I think the providence of God, Margaret Duville was wonderful at that. If you read her history, Margaret Duville, you know, those days Montreal was attached to France. Anyway, Margaret Duville was given a hospital that was broken. It was run by a group of brothers. The brothers were very elderly, couldn't take care of the hospital. So they gave it to Margaret Duville, and she rebuilt it. And that was our original first hospital. Maison de Mère Duville is the name of it now. It's our original mother house. And when you go to Montreal, if you ever have the opportunity, make sure you stop there and learn about the spirit of Marguerite Duville. But she was a woman who was patient. She was smart. She could stand up to the people that really gave her a hard time. And she could be nice about it. I read her letters, you know. And of course, in those days, the 1700s, they were very respectful of the clergy. Sorry, Father. Times have changed.
Second time today.
But actually, Margaret Duville, when you read her letters, it was clear what she wanted, what she needed, what she helped to take care of, all the poor people. Hospitals were not like we know them today. Hospitals were like hostels, where you took in people, you took in travelers, you took in people off the streets, people that needed to be cared for, but didn't have a place to go. So that was the spirit of Margaret Duville, and I always admire her because she would keep going back to the lay administration in Montreal, and she would keep going back to France to get what she needed to really take care of the poor. And I think for all of us here today, the transition now for us is all the challenges of the healthcare laws. I'm sure all of you know that, all the challenges in your states, in the country, the universal health care. I'm still praying for that universal health care someday. Don't make a face, David, because you might still be around when we get it.
I'm totally for it.
That everybody would be covered
Absolutely.
for health care. And you know, you can say what you want about the Canadian system, but they did away with all this, different, what do you call it? You know, we have Blue Cross Blue Shield.
They still have a lot of different plans. out
Yeah.
there,
And, but if you can go from place to place, it's not attached to your work anymore. So it's an experience. I've been up there and have been sick. I had a number, nobody ever knew my name, I didn't like that. But they would call me a number,
What was your number?
147.
There you go.
And I never forgot it.
Geez, my number in the draft was 184. I didn't forget that either.
But
You know,
anyway.
You talked about transitions
Yeah.
and change, and one of the things that, in this course, and one of the things that we all just naturally fall back on is, thinking about the pace is always greatest wherever we happen to be in terms of the change, right? So we thought that way 5 years ago, and we thought that way 10 years ago, and we thought that way, a year and a half ago, and we'll think that way 5 years from now. And one of the if you go back to the histories of the orders of the congregations, whether it's Felicians or religious hospitallers or Grey Nuns or whoever, Marists, the things they did are sort of awe-inspiring. And that's one of the things that it's easy to say, well, it was different then. Well, how? Why? They had some kind of an inner focus that allowed them, they clearly had the inner focus that allowed them to think the issue through passionately, zealously, and work really hard to make it, to implement the decisions they thought were the right ones. And it's no different now. I think one of the differences is, when I first started working in Catholic healthcare, and perhaps some of you as well, the mantra really was, sort of, if you couldn't figure something out that was Catholic, you ask the nuns, right? Because they'll know. They'll figure it out. If there's a problem with something, you'll ask them. That's us now. And as spooky as that sounds, not that we're nuns, I am not one, but as spooky as that sounds, the reality is it's true. And Kathy and her work with us and with this group in particular during these cohorts has really been talking about that in lots of different ways, right? We're one generation away, minds to hearts to feet. I mean, just sort of think about the reality of those issues, the way that she talks about those, and there's a privilege in that, of having that kind of responsibility going forward. I understand that yesterday Kathy read the letter from the Cardinal Prefect, and that you all clapped. So, which is an odd kind of response. I was sitting there thinking, well, isn't that interesting? Who would think that a group here, upon hearing a letter read from the Vatican, is going to clap about it? So let me tell you a story. When we first set when we first got the juridic status, so this would have been our first report into Rome went in 1997. And we worked really hard on this report because at the time there were only 2 public jury persons in the world, and so there was no kind of formula, to what you were going to do, what you needed to cover, how it was going to be received. And on your first one, you just don't know. And so we put a lot of work into this, and it was a tome. And we sent it in. And we got the letter back within a pretty short time frame. And I actually was going to try to grab a copy of that before this morning's being together here, and I didn't. But it went something like, thank you so much for sharing the work that you're doing as a public juridic person of pontifical right, and continuing the mission of the Grey Nuns and taking on this responsibility, and we really value the work that's being done in the mission. So you heard some common themes there? And I was given a talk in Chicago with on new structures in the church, because we were pretty avant-garde at the time. Lots of people were thinking about going juridic role. Lots didn't think it was a good idea. So there were lots of conferences that were going on at the time around that. So we're at one of the downtown hotels, and I am so proud of this letter. I stand up there and I say, I'm gonna read this letter to all of you. There are like 800 people, right? And they probably thought I was crazy. But I read this letter to them, and I said, you know, I am so proud of the fact that we've got this kind of relationship now, and we need to work really hard to maintain it. So every year when we send the report in and we get the letter back, it's an affirmation of the work that we're doing. Because many of you have seen that report. It really talks about what you all are doing. So we started the social accountability reporting in 1990. Sister Eileen Otting, a Grey Nun in Toledo, Ohio, worked with a small software designer in Toledo. I forget his first name, but his last name was Lyons, and they came up with this. They're the ones who came up with the design for the social accountability reporting. And so one of the first things, we were one of the first groups to really think it through and start working it as CHA was rolling it out. But really that report is all about the work that is happening throughout the system. They don't really understand our finances because it's so different from what they hear. They don't understand our system because it's really different. So what they really, really want to hear about is, what are we doing to do this? What are we doing to continue the mission? What are we doing to continue the ability for leaders and others within the system, the whole system, to understand the role that they have being part of the Catholic healthcare ministry? Not that everybody has to be Catholic, none of that, but just that everybody is part of advancing that. And so when we meet with them in a couple of weeks, that's what they're gonna wanna hear about. They're gonna wanna hear about the work you're all doing. And so I'll probably talk about being here today with this cohort when I meet with the Cardinal Prefect and his assistant and the group with the board. And it's I have time for one more story.
Yeah.
So you know, when you go for your first meeting at the Vatican, you're sort of nervous. Maybe you're sort of nervous. And the first you weren't there. The first time we went, we had back and forth. Yeah, that was a whole other story. But when we met for the first time with the prefect and the group that was there, there was a sister from Michigan who was the person who was really our contact at the Vatican, and she was really great about making sure everything was set, you know, everybody was comfortable, and we had the conversation, and it was a very formal, and you know how formal I am, right? I mean, I could be, but you have to be there, so you're there, and I got a suit on, and we all have our parts to play. You know, everybody says the things that they're supposed to say, and at the very end, the Cardinal Prefect at the time didn't speak English, so you have all these simultaneous translators going on. You're wearing these little headphones, and it's like being at the UN kind of thing. That's the picture I've always got when you think about being there. And he just asked, "What can we do to help you?" And I was like, you know, talk about not being prepared for a question. I don't think any of us thought that was gonna be the question. And what he really, I think what he really meant, because the conversation that we had at the time was, how do we help you to make sure that you're attracting leadership on the board and throughout the system that's gonna continue this work? That's really what he wanted to talk about. And so we talked about the formation programs, and we talked about how we recruit board members. The important thing I took away from that is they really care about what we're doing. And I know that, you know, Joe, you've had a chance to go and be part of those meetings too, and they really care about what we're doing there. In the midst of everything else, they really recognize the importance of this. In 2007, when we went, Jim Hamill was talking about the letter that we'd gotten, and that was a just-in-time letter, because we were over there, as he mentioned, and so he read the letter granting us the self-perpetuating juridic status, which again was a big deal. It's the first one in the world. And so we met with the Cardinal Prefect the next day, and the words he used were I mean, I'll get them close. Because we went through our presentation and we thanked them for, you know, the receipt of the letter, and we talked about it. He said, well, you know, you're really just part of the new church, because if we think about where the church is going, it's in the hands of the laity that the church is going to flourish. And so your hands are just continuing the work that Jesus started. So that was pretty awesome. So that stuck with me ever since then. That's how they think about what we're doing. So they care about what we're doing. They really want to make sure that what we're doing is having opportunities like this to tell the story, to continue the work, to continue the work in the name of the church. And so I'm really looking forward to visiting. I've been in another systems visit where it wasn't so friendly, where you know, they were nervous about, not about what the system was doing, but it was so big that they couldn't really get their arms around it. We're small enough, they get us, you know. We can talk about what we're doing, and we're not talking in hundreds and gazillions, and you know, but we're really talking about the connection that we have in places like today. So I rambled on there a bit, but it's you know, I wish all of you could be there, because one of the things that it really does is it's incredibly powerful. And I know on the tour at the corporate office, Kathy always makes people look at the pictures of me with the Pope. But, and again, it's not about me, but we were there at a time when he took the time to shake every person's hand who was in that private audience. Everybody who was there, if you go to their house or their office, has that picture. Because it's just like that.
I remember before that meeting, we were told the Pope was sick and that we couldn't spend a lot of time, you know, talking to the Pope privately. And I remember David walking back and forth in this cafe before, because he couldn't hold any papers, no papers. You had to just get up and speak, give a report to the Pope. So there's David walking back and forth in this cafe, trying to remember what he wanted to say. After he said everything, I said to him, "You did a good job, that was really great." And he says to me, "I have no idea what I said." He was so nervous. He was so nervous. The other thing is, I had this, you know, Margaret Duville had been canonized, and I had this glass piece I was bringing for the Pope. And the cardinals, they're always around, those cardinals surrounding us. And they say to me, you can't give the Pope anything. He's not well today and you just can't give him anything. Well, I had that anyway.
Yes.
And the Pope stood right in front of me, so what are you gonna do? So I said, Pope, I have this piece for you. This is the canonization for Margaret Duville. He says to me, what is it? I said, it's from the canonization of Margaret Duville. She was just canonized in 1990. And I said, I want you to have this. It's very precious. And he looks at me and he says, well, thank you, in his Polish accent. Thank you, but I'll tell you, the Cardinals came right away and that was missed out of there.
That's right. I'm surprised they didn't take you.
But there's a spirit. I think sometimes we think of the Vatican as something way out here. Actually, they're all human beings. They don't speak enough English, so we struggle a lot. But the translation is a big help.
Very good.
And I remember the day that we got the okay, we were having a workshop when we got the letter okay from Rome. And we knew we had a lot to prepare lay people to take over the public jurisdiction person status.
You mean the original one?
That's right.
Yeah.
The original, yeah. And so we got this letter from Rome after about, 2 months or something. And I said, my God, we're not ready. We can't make that right away. We have to really educate these first boards on what it means to be a public juridic person. So we had a lawyer, a canonical lawyer, and he says, well, you have to use it within a year. If you don't use it within a year, they're gonna think you don't really need it. So you better get your act together and get everybody educated so they understand what they're getting. And so we really worked hard. Our original boards, they really understood what they were undertaking. And then we had a huge ceremony as all the Grey Nuns came and we let go of everything. And it went over to the lay leadership. So, and that was a wonderful experience, but it was a hard experience because now everything was gone. And so, but I'll never forget that. I said, oh my God, we have to hurry up now. We only have a year to get everybody ready. And, but it worked out okay, don't you think?
It did.
Yeah. It did. So, do you have any questions? Yes.
I wonder if you could just say something as to why is it a big deal to be a public juridic person? We can do this right here in the United States of America and go on a happy way. Why is this a big deal?
Right.
No. After you, sister.
It's a big deal because a public juridic person, it's like an incorporation under canon law.
Right.
So it's similar to that, which means the responsibility then goes to whoever's the head of that corporate office. And it's not easy because it's always been sisters or brothers who have had that. Like all congregations are public juridic persons and they report to Rome. And in the old days, all of our institutions would report to the Grey Nuns and we would report to Rome. Now we relinquished that. So lay people now report to Covenant and write to Rome. They skip us. We've had our day.
Right.
So, but it's the responsibility that changes. It's a canonical right. You don't see public juridic persons except under civic law when you see it as in corporations. So those similarities are always there. But we operate under two laws, canonical law and civic law.
And I just think the whole thing is fascinating because, we sit here and we come from different traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And being a member of a religious community, that whole idea, it's a big deal.
Yep.
But this is just fascinating.
And you have to remember that health systems in the United States is different than Europe.
Yeah.
Europe is all socialized medicine, most of it. So you don't have the same type of a system. And we used to say to our Canadian sisters, you get the money and then you have to disperse it. We have to make up the budget and then we have to raise the money. So it's a whole different system. So it's the responsibility that comes with it.
Yeah, I maybe a little different lens.
It's a big deal because in order for Catholic healthcare to continue, it has to have linkage. It has to have linkage back to the church. And in order for that linkage to take place, you have to have a structure to allow that. And so there aren't a lot of options in the structure. You know, the local diocese or a congregation, both of which are juridic persons. I think where the Grey Nuns and the first group was really the Omaha group, which was a combination of the Franciscans, Dominicans, Charity of Nazareth, which were the first ones. We're really trying to break ground to say, if we don't want to have a bishop be the sponsor, and we envision a future when religious congregations may not want to sponsor, what do we do? And so in order to sponsor, you have to have juridic status. And in order to have juridic status, you have to have recognition from the church in a formal way. And I think the big deal from where we were putting it together was of making the transition of Vatican II to the laity. That was part of the rationale. And does that help?
Yes,
It's
because
really-
I think that's a question that looms in some people's minds, you know, what is this big deal?
Yeah,
You know, but
I remember when Dorothy Cooper and I were going around to all the boards, and when I say all the boards, at the time there were 4, so, think about now. So when we were going out to the boards and we were talking about PJPs, all I had to say was public juridic person of pontifical right, and eyelids went,
yeah.
done, okay. So, I got that. I mean, you're in it, it's important because we act in the name of the church. That's what a public juridic person means is we act in the name of the Catholic Church. That's huge. Right? I mean, for me it is. For our organizations, it should be, because we are a recognized portion of, part of the church.
That's what I wanted to hear.
That's huge, and, I think that's the part for our board back in '92. We really thought that, since the first request had taken 12 years to get approval, we took half of that time and said it'll be about 6 years, so we got plenty of time. That's why we really didn't think we needed to worry. And, I think we put it in April or May, and we got it in July. So my memory of what we said to each other might be a little different than what you said publicly here. I think we might have been a little less formal. And it was like, what? Wait a minute, this wasn't supposed to happen like this. And, that really was a critical time for our board, because we thought, well, okay, so we've been talking about this, and at that meeting, that following meeting, we had to say, you all ready for this? You all up for this? And for some of them, they're sitting there going, okay, so I didn't really pay attention to what it meant. So can we go over that part again? It's gonna be just like the benefits changes. Pay attention to what was gonna happen. So can we go over that again? And what I thought was wonderful was that we all felt that way.
Yeah.
I mean, all I remember was, I think I used the word awesome more that year than ever in my life before or since. In the talk of the transfer that there's the clip of, I think Nancy Mulvihill said I used awesome 32 times. And because that's the way we felt about it. Think about it, you don't have a lot of people to learn from, right? And we're out there going, "Oh, okay, we don't wanna screw this up, you know, cause, they're gonna be watching. And so we gotta take it very seriously. But it's pretty awesome. And when I forget that, so thank you, when I forget that is when it becomes ho-hum, you gotta, you know, you need the jolt to say, no, it's not ho-hum, it's really important. And that's one of the reasons to go back to Rome from time to time. Because that's part of what centers you in terms of why it's important. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Are we over, under, or good?
We're just right on target, okay, but it's really a special moment to have David and Stu with us this morning to share the story. I mean, I think that's just.
Got us out of the nursing home.
Yeah. No, 2 weeks ago, I said to Stu,
Gonna visit me when I get
"Do you
there."
think you come up and join us, you know, because we weren't too sure. And so I'm just so delighted that she's been able to join us, and that for David to come all the way up from Tewksbury, he's on his way back to the office right now to take care of other things after our next little piece, where we kind of celebrate our time together. So thank you all very much, and thank you, David, and
you.
your that was fabulous.
I just want to tell the group that up here, I'm gonna leave a paper here about the meaning of the word covenant while we chose the name covenant. Okay, and you can feel free to take a copy.
What we'll do is we'll put them on every table.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's
And-
good.
And so then we're going to take just a 5 minute, because did you enjoy the music at dinner last night?
Yeah.
And we have Peter back with us this morning to play for our celebration ritual. So we're going to just take a 5 minutes so we can get